And we have been talking about gifts that Jesus left us when he ascended. We're going to take a little break from that because this is Dads and Grads Sunday. We'll get back and we'll finish that up actually next week as we look at the last gift. But I did want to think a little bit first off about dads before we get to our Bible study this morning. I want to think about my own dad. And this is tough this year because I know he's going to be watching. Usually I can get away with basically saying anything, but you all know how much my dad means to me, and my mom too. They both played such a major role in my life and who I am. I am who I am because of my parents. That's just the bottom line. So anything you see good in me is them. Anything bad in me, I made up all by myself. But I do want to thank my dad. And this morning, as I was looking through Facebook to see if I had any messages or anything like that, I noticed a lot of people kind of posting what their dad meant to them. And my dad is great because, and all good stuff. Because he provided and he loved me. But really, there's two things that my dad taught me that I think really makes me who I am. And one is responsibility. Extremely responsible person. Worked hard, always did what he needed to do, was always dependable. If he said he was going to do it, he did it, no matter what. Very responsible in the way he interacted with others, the way he did his job, the way he was a dad, the way he was a scoutmaster, the way he was a Sunday school teacher, the way he was a deacon, the way anything he did, he was a very responsible person. And I appreciate that, and I watched him as he went out into the world and as he did what he did. And I said, I want to be like that. I want to be responsible, where my word means something. But also, and probably more important than all the things I kind of read this morning that people were saying about their dad and everything like that, is most important is the spiritual side. And the bottom line is my dad taught me in every situation, just do what is right. Don't care about what other people may be doing. Don't care about what other people may be saying about you. Don't care if you want to do it or not, whether you feel like you have time to do it or not, but in every situation, just do what is right. Doesn't matter if everybody, and he worked in a profession where he was basically a warden of a juvenile detention facility, and he hung out with probation officers and people like that. And we'd go to the picnic every year, and you'd see them just getting drunk, let's face it, and getting rowdy and foul-mouthed and everything like that. And all I could think is my dad has to live in that every single day, and yet he would not take part in any of that. He didn't care what they thought of him, didn't care what anything like that. He said, I am going to do what's right. And even when it came to dealing with the kids that he dealt with, let's face it, he saw some of the worst kids. He saw kids who just were lost, doing all kinds of terrible things. Yet, he said, I am still going to do what's right. I'm going to treat them with respect. I'm going to treat them as human beings. I'm going to treat them as people who have hope for the future. And the way he dealt with them, and again, as a Sunday school teacher and working in scouts and all the kids, as he dealt with the kids, it was always with compassion. It was always with great care. Yes, it was with discipline too. But in every situation, no matter what area of his life, it was always, let's do what's right. Let's not try to get around things. Let's not try to avoid things. Let's not try to cut corners. Let's just do it right. And hopefully I've learned that, sometimes through mistakes and not doing things the right way. But I learned that from him, just watching him. So I want to thank my dad. To be responsible and to do what is right, and I just want to thank him for all he means to me. So thanks, Dad. I appreciate that. And I know everybody here can tell a story about their dad and all he meant to them, and so I just have the opportunity because I have the microphone. So let's go now, if everybody would. Let's go to Exodus, and I'm going to grab my Bible here. And what I wanted to look at today was facing challenges. We're kind of looking at grads today, and obviously as you graduate from one thing or another, be it I'm graduating from kindergarten and going into elementary to junior high to high school to college to grad. And even when you graduate from graduate school, you're still a next step. There's still a next step. And what the reality of the matter is, whenever you are successful, whenever you've completed a task, you know what the reward is? A bigger task. Doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem fair. It's like I'm climbing this mountain and I'm going to get to the top of that mountain. And you get to the top of the mountain and all of a sudden you hear that voice that says, congratulations, you made it to the top. See the next mountain? That's your next challenge. And how many feel like that in their life? Just like each time you say, okay, I've made it, and I don't know how many kids I know, it's like, oh, I graduated from college. All right, I've completed the task. I'm free. No, you're not. Welcome to the real world. And even every step of the way, as you get new jobs and you get new situations, and even when you retire, am I right? There's still challenges. There's still new things to deal with. And the question is, how are we going to deal with those new challenges as God challenges us? As God puts us in new situations, how are we going to deal with that? And we're going to look today by looking at the story of Moses. So if everybody would turn their Bibles to Exodus chapter 3, we're going to start in verse 11. But I'm going to back up just a little bit myself and just remind you of who Moses is. Moses was born in Egypt to a Jewish family. And the proclamation from the Pharaoh was, if it was a male child that was born, you threw him in the Nile River. So, of course, his parents, when he was born, followed the rules and threw him in the Nile River in a boat. They put him in a boat, and they put him in the Nile River and followed it down. And, of course, he was accidentally happened to? No. He was found and given eventually to Pharaoh's daughter, who raised him, although who really raised him? His mother. Again, God, by providence, was taking care of this child. And this child grew up in Egypt for 40 years. Don't believe the movies, the cartoons. It was 40 years he was in Egypt before he finally said, I've had enough of what they are doing to my people. And he ended up murdering somebody, and when he knew people knew about it, he ran for his life as Pharaoh was going to kill him. And then he spent 40 years again, another 40 years, raising sheep out in the wilderness. So how old is he at this point, if you got your math right? 80. Is 80 kind of old to be challenged with a new challenge? Yes, it is. 40's old to be with a new challenge. 80's old to be challenged with a new challenge. And was it a small challenge he was going to be facing? No, it was a big challenge coming from God himself. So we're going to start in verse 11. Moses is out with his sheep and he sees a burning bush which is not being consumed. So he says, I'm going to go take a look at that. And the voice came from him and said, take off your shoes. This is holy ground. And he went before him. And he said what? The bush said, God said from that bush, what? You are going to go and you are going to get my people free. You're going to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Right? Is that a big task? What's going through your head if you're Moses right there? Wait a minute. This is Pharaoh. Is Pharaoh a big deal? Can anybody go in and even see Pharaoh? Pharaoh's a big deal. Does Pharaoh have a lot of power? And by the way, it's 40 years ago, but is there a limitation on a murder charge? Statute of limitations? How long is the statute of limitations on a murder charge? I don't know Pharaoh law, but there isn't one here. So he had murdered somebody, had run away, and he has to go back to Pharaoh and say, let the slaves go. And does that happen overnight? No. How many of you would have questions? How many of you would challenge that? How many of you would say, I don't know, Lord? And we all go through this. When we get a new challenge, we have questions, don't we? When we get a new challenge and we know God is leading us there, well, whether it's graduation from graduate school, what should I do next? What am I going to do with my career? Where should I work? Whether it's graduation from middle school, high school, what am I going to do? Where am I going to college? Where are all these things? Or no matter where you are in your life. How many of us are facing challenges? How many of us have some new challenges? How many have questions about where we're supposed to go from here? What should we do? Who is leading you? It better be God. And when God says, I've got a new challenge for you, here's some questions that may arise. Let's go to the first one, verse 11. And the Lord said unto him, that's chapter 4. I was already over there. Got ahead of myself. Chapter 3, verse 11. And Moses said unto God, Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And this is a very common first question. Who am I? Why choose me? Why are you giving me this challenge? Why are you choosing to? Who am I that I should be able to accomplish such a great task? Is that a good question? Yes. Because some of us will look at ourselves and say, I can't do that. I can't make it through that. And again, it's all kinds of challenges. Sometimes it may even be a health challenge. It may be a relationship challenge. It may be a financial challenge. It may be many things that we have to face. And our first question may be, who am I? I can't get through this. But what is the answer? Verse 12. And he said, Certainly I, God, will be with you. And this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this very mountain. I've got a plan. And the answer is, God is with you, right? So if God is with us, if God is the one who has called us, if God is going to be the one to bring us to success, it doesn't even matter who we are. If God has called it to us, will He get us through it? Absolutely. And by the way, does He know who you are? In fact, who knows you better than you? God does, right? And I want you to think for a minute. He says, I will be with you, but let's face facts. How long had God been with Moses? How long had God known that He was going to use Moses? Before creation, before he was born, He knew. Did He have a hand in the fact that he was brought into Pharaoh's household, that he was brought up for 40 years in Pharaoh's household as a royal child? Can you imagine what he learned that others did not learn? Did he learn tactics and fighting? Did he learn how to read? Did he learn how to lead? Did he learn all of these things that he normally wouldn't have learned as a slave, right? Did God have a plan in his life? Was God working with him those first 40 years? And you say, well, he made a mistake and murdered somebody. What, was God there too? Was God there to protect him and make sure he could get out? Was God even with him for the past 40 years as he led sheep in the wilderness? By the way, that very wilderness that he was going to have to lead 1 million people through. And frankly, is it easier to lead sheep or easier to lead people? Sheep, so. But it's good practice, isn't it? Did he know where the pastures was? Did he know where the water was? Did he know where things were? Did he know the path through? And yes, God said, I'm taking you here. There's a reason I've had you here for 40 years. Because you're going to come back to this very same mountain. And by the way, what mountain was he standing on at the time? A little mountain called Mount Sinai. Kind of an important mountain, isn't it? And did God bring him back to that place? In fact, was it on that very same mountain that he was given the 10 Commandments and given the law of God and saw a glimpse of God? I mean, so many things God was going to do, right? So I ask you, as God says, I've got a challenge for you, who will be with you to face that challenge? God will. But also remember, look back. Look at all the other challenges you've faced. Look at all the other mountains you've climbed. Look at all the other things you've been through. Who's with you through all those too? And what was he doing in all those other challenges, all those other things? What was he doing? He was preparing you for the challenge ahead of you. Did you know that? He was, though, wasn't he? He was preparing you the entire way, just as he was preparing Moses. So, who am I? I'm exactly who God needs to accomplish what he needs to accomplish at this time. I think my mic went out. All right, folks. Let's go back the old-fashioned way. We'll be okay. This is what happens when Bob's not around. See? Give him his props. All right, so just remember that. Who am I? I'm called by God. I'm a child of God. I am who God has prepared for this task. He is the one that's brought me here. He's the one He's got that challenge for me. He will bring me through. Who am I? I'm called of God, right? And who's with you? God. Well, that's really the second question. Let's go back to Exodus again. Because he has a second question in Exodus chapter 3, verse 13. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers has sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, what is his name? And what shall I say to them? And this comes the second question. Who am I? Also another question is, okay, I understand you, God, are the one calling me. I understand that you will be with me. But here's the question, who is God? And do we need to remind ourselves of that sometimes? Who is God? And then through the next few verses, what God does is reminds him who he is. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, who brought them through everything. I am the one that promised to them to bring them to a promised land. In fact, we know that he said to Abraham, yeah. How long ago was Abraham by this point? About 500, 600 years. Is that a long time? Long time ago. He told Abraham, I'm going to bring my people. I'm going to take them to a foreign land. They're going to be there for a long time, 400 years, and then I'm going to bring them out. Did God have a plan? Who is God? God is the creator. God is powerful. God is able, isn't he? And that's who he is. In fact, what was the answer that he gave? Verse 14, and God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am has sent me unto you. Who is God? He is everything. He is the eternal God who exists and nobody made him. He is the eternal God of eternal power who is and knows everything and can do everything. He is everything, isn't he? Unto him and through him are all things, right? That is the one calling. And we need to remind ourselves of that sometimes. Who am I? I'm called by God. Well, who's God? He is the I am. The eternal God who is calling us. Does he know what he's doing? And we have to remind ourselves of that sometimes. Because, by the way, there are going to be some parts of our own self who say, well, I don't know. I don't know if I can trust him. I don't know if he's got the right idea. I don't know. You right? And by the way, is somebody going to be whispering in our ear the same thing? Oh, yeah. Satan, even the world. And we say, no. But who is God? The omniscient, omnipotent, eternal God who says, I am calling you to this challenge. He's already been there. He already knows all the way through. He is the great I am, isn't he? The one who has always been, is, and always will be. Put your trust in him. Okay, now he has some serious questions. Let's go to chapter 4, verse 1. So God says, this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to do. You will be going to the Pharaoh. You will tell him to let him go. He won't, but I will deliver him by a mighty hand. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I keep my promises. This is who I am. Tell him who I am. Go. And Moses says, wait. I'm still not so sure about this. Chapter 4, verse 1. And Moses answered and said, but, you ever have those thoughts in your head? You know, okay, got you, but wait, hold on a second, God. Don't. Behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, the Lord has not appeared unto thee. Aha! Here's the problem, Lord. What if I fail? All right? What if I go and I tell him God has called me to come get you out of Egypt, to bring you to the promised land? God, the eternal God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he is here, and he has brought me, and I'm here. Let's go. And they say, I don't believe you. And they won't go. And they won't support me. And Pharaoh won't let them go. What happens if I fail? You ever have that thought go through your head? Well, I know God's on my side, but I'm going to mess it up. And they won't listen. And it'll all go wrong. So what's the point of even going if I'm going to fail? Well, does God have an answer for that one? Sure he does. Verse 2. And the Lord said unto him, what is that in thine hand? And he said, a rod. Why was he carrying a rod? Because he's a shepherd. That's his job. He needs that rod, right? And he said, cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. How many of you would flee too? Don't pick on him. If I threw my staff down and it turned into a snake, I would flee from that snake. I don't care what kind it was. So he ran away. Verse 4, and the Lord said unto Moses, put forth thine hand and take it by the tail. Just a little heads up. If you ever run into a snake, and my dad taught me this, if you run into a snake and you think it may be poisonous, do not grab it by the tail. Because what will every snake do if you grab it by the tail? It will turn back around and get you. So don't do that. But God told him to do that. And you know what? He did. That's an amazing thing, isn't it? And take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath appeared unto thee. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, put now thine hand in thy bosom. And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, the hand was leprous as snow. That, again, freak you out a little bit? What is he reminding him? Who's in control? Right. Who is with him? Who is able? Yes, you will likely fail on your own, but who is with you? God is with you. And if he wants to, will he succeed? Yes. Nothing can stop him. Verse 7, he said, put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again and plucked it out of his bosom. Behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. So it turned right back. No leprosy. And it shall come to pass, if they will not believe thee, neither hearken to the voice of the first sign, that thou wilt believe, they will believe the voice of the latter sign. So he gave him the tools. He said, I am with you again, right? And he has the power. So what's the answer? What if I fail? God does not fail. Right? Many things look impossible when we're saying, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that. And we look at it and say, well, that failed. Why did it fail? Because it's saying, I'm going to do it. When we say, God, use me, will he succeed? Will he accomplish what he wants to accomplish? Can anybody stop the work of God? And if God is telling him to go, and if God says they will believe, and if God says Pharaoh will eventually, after he does all the plagues, will let you go, if he says you will stand on this mountain, if he says they will enter the promised land, guess what's going to happen? They will. So we got to remember that. Yes, I may fail, but God does not fail. And if I'm going with God, will God use me in mighty ways? And will he accomplish what he's called us to accomplish? Yes, he will. Then chapter 4, verse 10. After all of that, you would think he'd go at this point, right? Let's be honest, though. How many of us would go at this point? Again, 80 years old, been shepherding for 40 years, going back to a land where he's basically a wanted man, to go tell Pharaoh, let people go. I would still be hesitant too. Let's be honest with ourselves. I'd still be going, I don't know about this, especially when he comes up with this great question, verse 10. And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. This comes down to the question of what? What if I can't? What if I'm just unable? I just can't. I have a stammering tongue, and you want me to go and speak? You want me to be forceful to tell Pharaoh to let the people go? You want me to be forceful to explain to the people that God is with me, that God has done all these things? You want me to stand up and make speeches? I'm slow of tongue. I stammer. I don't have the gifts. I don't have the abilities. What if I can't? What if I get up there and freeze? What if I get up there and I can't say what I'm supposed to say? What if I can't? Does God have an answer to that one too? Oh, yeah. You have to remember, who is God? And what does He know? He knows everything. Why is He picking you for this challenge? Because you are who He needs. Does He know what limitations you have? Does He know things you can't do? Does He also know the things you may not be able to do now, but you will be able to do later? How many here have already done things in their life that they never thought they would be able to do? God will see you through, won't He? In fact, what was His answer in verse 11? And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. I am with you, right? What's the answer? God knows what you can and can't do. Better than we do. We look at our limitations, we look at our frailties, we look at our errors, and we look at the things we've made, and we say, I can't do it. God says, what? We can overcome that. In fact, one of the great men of God, Paul himself, was not a good speaker. That's what he says. Not a great orator. People would fall asleep and fall out windows and die when he was speaking. Not a great forceful speaker, but did God use him in mighty ways? Peter, a man who at times lacked faith, even at a time denied Jesus Christ 3 times, didn't he? At times he would give in to peer pressure. He would worry about what other people would say about him. But was God able to use him in mighty ways? Gideon, the smallest of the smallest family and the smallest tribe, could God use possibly him? Yes. Could God use Samson? As weak and poor as he was? Could God use little David to defeat a giant? Can God? God looks at us and doesn't say, oh, they can't. With God's help, can we? And if God has called us to overcome that mountain, if God has called us to climb to that highest peak, we can look down at our legs and look down at our heart and say, I can't do it. I'm not able. But with God, are we able? Yes, we are. So don't let our own ideas of our frailties and limitations sway us. We need to just go, don't we? Then finally, you think by now, okay, now Moses has got it, right? He's figured it out. But in verse 13 he says, And Moses said, O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt. Which is another way of saying, send somebody else. Choose somebody else. Frankly, I don't want to. And this is the question. Why not? Isn't there somebody else more eloquent? Isn't there somebody else better trained? Isn't there somebody else more forceful? Isn't there somebody else with more faith? Isn't there somebody else who could do this job? And there's somebody else who can get to this mountaintop? And what's God's answer? I want you. This is your challenge. Other people have their own challenges. Other people have their own tasks. Other people have their own jobs. This is for you. Now, God was very kind, if not a bit perturbed. Verse 14, And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. He said, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well, and also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee. And when you seeth him, he will be glad in his heart. And I love that, because God, again, knows his weakness of faith, knows he has this problem. But even before they spoke, even before he came to him in a burning bush, he had already sent for Aaron to come out to give him the support he needed, to get him past it. How great is our God? Why not someone else? The answer is no. I'm going to use you. But God, with patience and understanding, and yes, sometimes a little anger, a little annoyance. Every parent knows this feeling. I'll get you there, kid, but you're on my last nerve. But I love you. We'll get you through, right? But God, with patience and understanding and with the support we need, will get us there, won't he? And that's one of the beauties. Did Aaron come? Yes. And as they start out, as they first approach Pharaoh, it is Aaron. God tells Moses what to say. Moses tells Aaron what to say. Aaron speaks to Pharaoh. But it is a very short period of time before who's doing the speaking? Moses. Because what did God know? I need to get you over this hump, but I know you'll take it from there. I know what you can do. I know you'll be successful. And by the way, were they successful? Did Pharaoh let the people go? Did the people eventually believe him that God had sent him? And did they leave Egypt just as God intended? And just did they get over that mountaintop? Yeah. And by the way, let's keep something in mind. Once they got over that mountaintop of getting out of Egypt, what did they find when they got over that mountaintop? A bigger mountaintop. Because then he had to lead those people 2 years to the promised land. And then they wouldn't go in. So he's going to leave another 38 years in the wilderness. So he had some challenges, didn't he? And he was 80 years old, and he was 120 before he finally got some rest. But God knew he was the right one for the job. So whatever challenge you're facing, and again, it could be, as we're talking about grads and things like that, it could be, next steps in your education, or it could be next steps in your job, or it could be next steps in your life. It could be whatever challenge God has for you, know that he is with you, right? He is who? The great I am. He knows what he's doing. He's the holy God. He is with you. And he does not fail. If he has something for you, if he has a challenge for you, he knows how to get through it. And he will get through it with you. You may have some ups and downs. You may make some mistakes. You may struggle, but will God get you through? And does he know everything? Does he know our weaknesses? Does he know what we need to work on? And will he get through? Yes. You are it. Bottom line. The challenge is yours. Go with God. And that's the key. One more place we need to go. Let's go to Exodus chapter 4, verse 19. And the Lord said unto Moses and Midian, Go, return into Egypt, for all the men are dead which sought thy life. And Moses took his wife and his sons and set them upon an ass and returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. So at the end of all the excuses, at the end of all the questions, what did Moses do? Very simply, go. God said go, and he just said what? We're going. And he went. The bottom line, that's where he wants us to be, right? What is the challenge, Lord? I've got some questions. Believe me, he's got the answers, right? And at the end of it, we just need to say what? I will go. In fact, Moses' protege, Joshua, he had a very difficult challenge, didn't he? He was supposed to take the people into the land, that next generation, lead them in the land, to defeat those walled cities, to defeat the giants, to take over this land. And remember what God told him? As that he was facing that challenge? Be strong and of good courage. Be strong to obey the words of the Lord. Follow his commandments. Do not turn to the left or to the right of it, but follow his rule. Be strong and courageous. I've got you. And we need to go with the same attitude, don't we? Go and say, God is with me, I will go. I will face this challenge. If he's brought it to me, he'll get me through it, and we will get to the other side, and then we can face the next challenge after that, being made stronger for what we've been through. And just go. Trust the Lord, and take on whatever challenge God has for you. And he will be with you all the way. How many are happy about that? Because the only other alternative is to try to do it all by yourself. How would that have turned out? How did it turn out for the people when they try to go into the land by themselves? It will not work out. But with God, what's possible? Whatever he desires is possible, isn't it? If we'll just trust him. And he will get us through. Let's pray. Heavenly